Well, before all of that, one question is playing on the minds of parents of young teenagers this week: to vaccinate or not?
Well, over the weekend, the UK's vaccine advisory body refused to give the green light to jabbing healthy children aged 12 to 15 years on health grounds alone.
The chief medical officers of the 4 nations will now likely have to make a decision on vaccinations for children this week.
So why did the Vaccine Advisory Board come to their decision? Well, we can find out more now from one of its members, Professor Adam Finn. Good morning to you, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. So why? Why did you come to this decision then?
Well, it's a tight decision, this one. To make sense of it, you have to understand that young, healthy teenagers are very unlikely to get seriously ill with COVID. We're looking now at the incidence of long COVID, and that's also quite unusual. And so the benefits to be gained by offering vaccine to all of these children are quite modest. On the other side of it, there's quite a high level of uncertainty around the safety of the vaccine in this age group. It's not because it's known to be dangerous, but it does cause side effects, rare, occasional side effects that could turn out to be serious. And so we very much prefer to recommend vaccinations for children when we're really confident that the benefits clearly outweigh the risks. And in this case, it's quite a close balance with a high level of uncertainty. That leaves us with a position where a slightly confusing message, and of course we all prefer certainty and clear messages, but it wouldn't be scientifically honest to say that this was absolutely fine when we really don't know for sure that it is.
One of those side effects that you mentioned, and this is something that seems to have come to light in America, between the ages of 12 and 17, there have been, admittedly, very few, but there have been cases of inflammation of the heart. Now, as a parent here, that's one of those statistics that you think, right, OK, that could possibly have changed my opinion now on the safety of this vaccine.
Yes, these are rare cases, and the good news about those cases is that the children affected do seem to, they can be quite ill, but they do get better quite quickly and go home from hospital seemingly well. And so far, we have no real concerns about this. The problem is, though, that the investigations done on the hearts of these children do show some changes on the scans. And it will take some time to find out whether those changes resolve and they end up with a perfectly normal heart with no risk of future problems or not.
So let's just look at what you just said now. So if you're a parent of 12 to 17-year-olds, you're faced with the decision here whether to vaccinate your child or not. You've already said at the start of this chat, very little likelihood that a child is going to have any issues whatsoever from COVID. Very rare occasions when they do. However, on these rare occasions with heart inflammation, you can't be sure that there isn't long-term damage?
That's right. We can't be absolutely sure of that. And that's why, indeed, the JCVI has hesitated to make a clear recommendation to immunize all these children, because it is conceivable that it will turn out that there will be a small number of children who could have long-term injury as a consequence of this. And we are very definite in this country that we don't recommend vaccination routinely unless we're really sure that the benefits outweigh the risk. It's not that we know that the risks outweigh the benefits in this case, it's just that we don't know yet for sure. And we do need to hear from our colleagues in the States where they've been seeing these cases, and also start to investigate cases that are turning up in this country in order to find that out.
Can I ask you a question then? Because another reason to vaccinate was people were saying, you know, kids are super spreaders. They carry it, they pass it on to everybody. So if they have the vaccine, they're less likely to pass it on to somebody else, bring it home to grandma or whoever it might be. But there's evidence saying that actually that's not the case either now.
For other viruses like influenza, that certainly is the case, that children are very efficient at spreading the virus around to each other and to their families and other people they come in contact with. In contrast, in the case of COVID, although children can get the infection, of course, and they can infect other people, they do appear to be less infectious than adults. So although schools being open will result in some cases and transmission, it's not the same story as with influenza. And the other side to this is that the vaccines that we have are a little bit disappointing in their ability to prevent onward transmission. They're extremely good at stopping you from getting seriously ill, which of course is a real risk for people of my age, but much smaller risk for young children. But they don't guarantee by any means that you won't get the infection or spread it to other people. They do reduce that risk, and therefore they could play a part in reducing transmission and outbreaks in schools, but they won't deal with the problem entirely.
You say that our eye is almost off the ball here from what really matters, and that is the adults that have decided to be unvaccinated. 3/4 of under 50s in hospital with coronavirus are unvaccinated. That's 5,098 under 50s, 73% unvaccinated, 14% received one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, 10% had received both doses. Now, we've always been told, and we do appreciate that, you know, we're always told to follow the science, but the science is learning. This is a new thing that we're all working our way through, with remarkable effects as far as the vaccine is concerned. But that 73% of the under 50s in hospital are unvaccinated.
Yes, and I think this is a very important point. I mean, we're considering at the moment, the CMOs are considering whether or not to offer vaccine to around about 3 or a bit more than 3 million healthy young teenagers. But there are at least 6 million people, adults out there, who've not yet been vaccinated over a wide range, more young people, but also some middle-aged and elderly people. And so I think we've clearly failed to communicate clearly enough to those people why it is imperative that they do get vaccinated. I think it's a bit too easy just to blame these people, but we should be asking ourselves, well, what do we need to do to make it clear? Because for someone of my age, it's a no-brainer. There's absolutely no sense in doing anything other than get vaccinated, because you're really playing with an enormous risk if you're exposed to the virus, and there's a lot of virus around. So I do think that's something we need to really work on, because that really is the solution to the problem.
But there are people with very, very strong views here. We see the demonstrations on TV, people who still believe and you know, widely refuted reasons why they're, you know, I think we're mostly away from the microchip aspect now. But there are still people who have very strong beliefs that A, they don't believe in the virus in the first place, and they certainly don't believe in the vaccine.
Yeah, that's right. And there are people, and I receive emails every day from people who are extremely angry with me, either because I'm not being strongly pro-vaccine enough, or that I'm being too strongly pro-vaccine. And there are people at both ends of the spectrum who have very strong views on this. But in the end, what we need to do is to work out how to get through to those people. And you know, it may well be that someone like me is the last person that those people will listen to, but they do listen to each other, and they do listen to other people. And I think we really need to work on that and to understand how to help people understand the reality of the situation.
Are they listening too much to the internet?
Well, the internet is a marvelous tool, but it has many problems, as we all appreciate. And I think one of them is that it creates these sort of bubbles of people who only really are communicating within small groups and not listening to the wider information that's out there. So I guess that is part of the problem. It's also human nature, you know, that we trust people that we know and who we see as being like us. And so an old white bloke like me on the BBC or the ITV may not be the best way of helping people understand and trust and make right decisions.
Well, thank you for your time this morning. And we're going to talk to Laura Nibbs now, who's a parent. Laura, welcome to you this morning. Now, you've got your children there. They're aged between 3 and 14, so you've got a broad spectrum of children's ages there. And this is a concern that you have. You yourself aren't vaccinated.
No, I'm not vaccinated.
And so the thought of vaccinating your eldest, your 13-year-old, how are you feeling about that?
It's a no-brainer for me as to not have her vaccinated. As any parent, we outweigh risks, don't we, to protect our children. And for me, the risk of giving her a vaccine that is still in the trial period, that doesn't stop you from contracting COVID, doesn't stop you from spreading it. And obviously, I've had many serious reports of blood clots, serious health implications. We don't know what the long-term side effects of the vaccine is. That's not something that I would be willing to have injected into my child when the likelihood is if she contracts COVID, you know, she's probably going to be poorly for a little bit and she'd get over it. You know, it's got a high survival rate. She's got no underlying health conditions. So for me, the risk would be, it's more worthwhile to take the risk from COVID than to take the risk from the vaccine.
You have taken the decision that that if there was a vaccination day at school, that you to be absolutely sure that you make sure your kids didn't go to school that day.
Yes, she would not be attending school. And I'm not saying that as the school would do that without my permission, you know, on purpose, but I wouldn't even take the risk of that happening accidentally. Because obviously, once that happens, there's nothing then I can do about it. So I would not take that risk at all. No, she would be staying at home.
Why haven't you been vaccinated?
I just don't believe in the vaccination. I'm young, I'm healthy. I feel like if I was to contract COVID, that I would be absolutely fine. For me, vaccinations that you get really minimise the chance of you catching that certain illness. This doesn't do that. So for me, it's like, well, what is the vaccination for? If it's not going to stop me from spreading it, it's not going to stop me from contracting COVID. And then the risk factor of it still being in the trial phases and having serious side effects that have been reported, it's not worth having the vaccine in my eyes. I just feel...
Let's talk to Philippa now.
Thank you, Laura.
She's got a 13-year-old. Before we go to the vaccination of your 13-year-old, what do you say to the reasons that she hasn't been vaccinated?
So for Laura herself, unfortunately, we are seeing people who are young without underlying health conditions in hospital. You mentioned specifically about the blood clots, and I'm taking a guess that you are under 40 years old, so you would not be given the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is the one that is associated in younger people with blood clots. But that isn't true of the Pfizer one. And definitely for adults, the balance of risk versus benefits is hugely weighted towards
we saw
benefits.
those stats that
Absolutely.
3/4 of under 50s in hospital with coronavirus are unvaccinated.
Absolutely. So this is, for adults, it's really clear. Now, what the JCVI is saying with regards to teenagers is that there is marginal benefit. They're not saying that the risks outweigh the benefit. They're not saying it's not safe. They're saying that those benefits are marginal. And everything that we do in life and in medicine is always on that scale of risk versus benefits. And what we need to also do, though, is look at that big picture. You talked about the vaccine and whether or not it stops you getting it or stops you transmitting it. It reduces those things. It doesn't stop them entirely, but it reduces those things.
But what about the 13-year-olds? You've got a 13-year-old.
I do have a 13-year-old.
So what's your view? And we've been here in this studio really non-alarmist over the past 18 months. We've tried to take a very, very balanced, let's step back, let's have a look, let's wait a few days, let's not react immediately because obviously the news and the science can change. That's a little bit alarming, the fact that in America there is this percentage, very small, of children who have inflamed hearts, and that we've heard there, we're not entirely sure that couldn't be long-term.
So it is alarming, but... And the but is really important. Let's talk about numbers. And the numbers are really small. Let's talk about the numbers of fit, healthy, and it is more in males than in females, university students in America. And there have been studies which show that the risk of myocarditis from COVID seems to be greater than from the vaccine. And the myocarditis that they're getting from the vaccine, again, really, really small numbers, does appear to be self-limiting. No one can predict what's going to happen.
And it also,
in 10 years.
you've got to think that we saw so many children missing out on their education, having to isolate at home, being away from their friends. I mean, beside the COVID side of stuff, this vaccination, are you saying, will lead to people not having to do that, so mental health will be better?
So I think that that will be something that the CMO is considering. Now, as a GP, I look at you holistically, and access to education, your mental health for the social development, access to your maybe clinically vulnerable grandparents, all of those things. If we look at all of those things together, that for lots of people is likely to tip the scale towards the benefit. And the other thing is, yes, my eldest is 13. He's also saying, I want it.
He wants it.
And whilst we, of course, are getting parental consent in the same way that we do for nasal flu vaccine, it's going to be coming home in everybody's school bag in the next few days, that written consent form. Nobody is going to be doing anything against your consent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.